The twins were crying again. Amora could hear them through the walls of the estate, that sharp, desperate wailing that only children abandoned by sleep could produce. She set down her mop, dried her hands on the side of her uniform, and moved through the dark hallway without turning on a single light. She had learned the geography of this house the way a blind woman learns a room, by feel, by memory, by the weight of repetition. She pushed open the door to the nursery. 2 small boys, no older than 3 months, lay in matching ivory cribs positioned beneath a window that looked out onto the manicured lawns of the Osei estate. The moon was high and cold, and it cast a pale light across their faces, identical faces, round and perfect and furious with hunger. Amora moved to the first crib and lifted the child with the ease of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She pressed him to her chest, began to hum, low, steady, the kind of sound that existed below music but above silence, and within seconds, the wailing softened to a whimper. "Sure," she whispered. "Amora is here." She reached across and laid her free hand on the second twin's belly, applying gentle pressure, letting him feel the warmth of her palm. He quieted too. Always like this, the two of them calmed by the same signal, the same presence, the same woman. Not their mother. Their mother had been gone for 6 weeks. Amora Mensah had come to work at the Osei estate 3 years before the twins were born. She had arrived from a small town outside Accra with 2 cloth bags, a reference letter from a pastor who barely knew her, and a determination so quiet it was easy to mistake for submission. She was 24 years old. She had a diploma she never spoke about, a debt she never mentioned, and a younger sister back home who needed school fees paid every term without fail. The Osei family was one of the wealthiest in all of Ghana. Their money was old, built on timber and cocoa in the colonial era, reinvested into banking and real estate in the decades that followed. By the time Kwame Osei inherited the family empire at 32, his net worth was a number that most people in his country would never see in 10 lifetimes. He was tall, serious, and carried the kind of quiet authority that required no performance. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His wife, Serena, was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful: maintained, deliberate, constructed. She had come from a Nigerian family of comparable wealth. Their marriage had been celebrated in 2 countries and photographed in 3 international magazines. It was, by every visible measure, perfect. Amora had worked as a housemaid, then as a senior housekeeper, then, after the other staff gradually turned over, as the woman who simply held everything together. She cooked when the chef was sick. She managed schedules when the household manager quit. She never complained, never demanded, never drew attention to the expanding scope of her labor. Mr. Osei noticed. He had always noticed. But he said nothing, because men like Kwame Osei did not give domestic workers compliments. They gave them salaries, and the Osei salary was 3 times what Amora could have earned anywhere else. That was enough. It had to be enough. The twins were born on a Tuesday in March, 7 weeks premature, delivered by emergency cesarean after Serena's blood pressure climbed to a level that frightened even the specialists. They were small and fragile and placed immediately into incubators. Serena, weakened and terrified and confronting something in that hospital room that no one around her understood, asked to be transferred to a private facility in London for her recovery. Kwame agreed. He always agreed where Serena's health was concerned. What no one anticipated, not the doctors, not Kwame, not the extended family who descended on the estate in the first days after the birth, was that Serena would not come back. Not in 2 weeks. Not in a month. Not in 6. The calls came at first, brief, stilted conversations between Kwame and his wife that Amora sometimes overheard fragments of from the hallway. Serena's voice on speakerphone, thin and distant, speaking about doctors and treatments and needing more time. Kwame's voice in response, measured, patient, the voice of a man who had learned to wait. But the visits never came. And slowly, quietly, the calls became less frequent. And the twins remained. Amora had not been hired to be a nanny. But there was no nanny. There had been one, a Scottish woman named Mrs. Elliot who arrived 2 days after the boys came home from the hospital. She was experienced, credentialed, and completely undone by the simultaneous needs of 2 premature infants who refused to sleep on any schedule that resembled reason. She resigned after 11 days, citing health concerns that Amora suspected were really sanity concerns. The agency sent a replacement. The replacement lasted 3 weeks. After that, there was no replacement. What there was Amora. Amora who woke at 2 in the morning and at 4 in the morning and at 6 in the morning. Amora who learned the difference between the cry that meant hunger and the cry that meant pain and the cry that meant simple loneliness, the need to be held by something warm and alive and present. Kwame tried. She would give him that. In those first months, she would pass him in the hallway at 3 in the morning and find him standing at the nursery door in his dress shirt, still wearing the tie from whatever meeting had kept him until midnight, looking at his sons through the door frame with an expression she could not name. Not cold. Not absent. Something more complicated than either. But he did not know how to go in. He did not know what to do once inside. So Amora went in. Every time. She went in because the babies were crying, and because she was the one who knew how to make them stop, and because, though she would not have been able to explain this to anyone, she had already begun to love them. Not as her own. She was clear-eyed enough to know the danger of that thinking. They were Kwame Ose's sons. She was the hired help. The line was real, and she drew it for herself every morning like a rule she could not afford to break. But love does not always ask permission. Sometimes it simply arrives, like a child placed in your arms in the middle of the night, and by the time you understand what has happened, it is already too late to put it back. She named them, in her own private language. Their official names were Kofi and Kojo, chosen by Kwame before the birth, traditional names, strong names. But in the nursery, in the dark, in the language of their earliest hours together, she gave them smaller names. Kofi became Ko. Kojo became Joe. She whispered these names like passwords, like prayers, and the boys responded to them the way infants respond to the voice of the person who feeds them and holds them and exists as the primary warmth of their world. When Ko took his first steps, it was Amora's hands he reached for. When Joe said his first word, Mama, his eyes were looking directly at her face. She did not correct him. She should have. She knew, even in that moment, that she should have said no. No, that is not my name. I am Amora, I work here. But the word was so new and so perfect and so completely free of any cruelty that she could not bring herself to take it from him. She filed it away instead, tucked it somewhere she never took out and examined directly, the way you tuck away something that is both precious and forbidden. Kwame saw it happen. He was not blind. He watched his housekeeper become something else in the orbit of his sons, saw the way the boys tracked her movement across a room, the way Ko climbed into her lap without asking, the way Joe pressed his small head against her knee when he was tired. He watched and he said nothing. Because what was there to say? That she was doing too much? That she was caring too deeply? How did a man make that complaint without indicting himself? He was building something. That was what he told himself in those years. He was expanding the company, securing the family's legacy, making sure the fortune that would one day belong to Kofi and Kojo was large enough to give them options he had never had. He was doing what men like him were built to do, generating, protecting, providing. But sometimes, late at night, walking past the nursery and hearing the sound of Amora's voice inside, low, steady, a song that was not quite a song, he felt something shift in his chest. Something he did not examine. He gave her a raise instead. He always gave her a raise. It was the only language he trusted himself to use. The boys were 3 years old when Serena returned for the first time. She came without warning, a car in the driveway on a Thursday afternoon, luggage Amora did not recognize, perfume that filled the ground floor before Serena herself appeared in the doorway. She was thinner than Amora remembered. Her eyes held something closed and careful. Kofi and Kojo were in the garden when she arrived. Amora had taken them out after lunch, as she always did, and they were running barefoot through the grass with the total abandon of children who have never been told to be careful. Serena stood at the garden door and watched them for a long time. The boys noticed her eventually. They stopped running. They looked at this woman in the doorway, this stranger who was not a stranger, who had their father's photographs on the wall and their birth certificates in the family safe, and they did neither the thing Amora had hoped for nor the thing she had feared. They simply stared. Serena crouched down. She opened her arms. She said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be natural, "Hello, my babies." Ko looked at Amora. Joe looked at Amora. Amora kept her face completely still. She nodded, small, encouraging, the nod of a woman who understood her place in this scene with total clarity. "Go to her," the nod said. "She is your mother. Go." Ko took 3 steps toward Serena. Stopped. Went back and pressed himself against Amora's leg. Joe did not move at all. Serena's face did something complicated. She stood up slowly. She looked at Amora, not with anger, exactly, but with something that would become anger given enough time and privacy. "You've been taking care of them," Serena said. "Yes, Since I left." "Yes, Serena looked at her sons. She looked at the way their small hands were gripping the fabric of Amora's uniform. She looked at the expression on the maid's face, that careful, composed, utterly neutral expression that told her nothing and everything at once. "I see," Serena said. She went inside. That night, Amora heard voices behind the master bedroom door. Kwame's voice low and even, Serena's voice rising and falling in waves that did not resolve. She could not make out the words. She did not try. She went to the nursery instead. She sat between the two small beds as she always did, in the chair she had positioned there in the first week and never moved. Ko was already asleep. Joe lay awake, watching her in the dark with eyes that understood more than any 3-year-old should. "Amora," he said. "Yes, Joe." "Is that lady going to take you away?" Amora was quiet for a long moment. She reached out and smoothed the blanket across his small shoulders. She kept her voice even, warm, the voice she had trained herself to use in this room. The voice that meant everything is fine and you are safe. "No one is taking anyone anywhere," she said. "Go to sleep." He closed his eyes. She sat in the dark long after his breathing deepened and steadied. The house around her was quiet. But something had changed tonight. She could feel it the way you feel weather, not in what you can see, but in the air, in the pressure, in some animal instinct older than language. Something had changed. And nothing, Amora understood with cold certainty, would ever be the same. Serena Osei did not unpack her luggage that first night. Amora noticed this the following morning when she went to collect the laundry from the master bedroom corridor. The large cream-colored suitcases were still standing exactly where the driver had placed them. Upright, handles extended, like two people waiting for a decision that had not yet been made. The smaller vanity bag sat on top. Nothing had been moved. She said nothing. She collected what she had come to collect and she left. But she thought about those suitcases all morning. Serena came down for breakfast at 9:30, which was late by the rhythm of the Osei household. Kwame had already left for the office. He was always gone before 7, a habit so old it had become part of the architecture of the house itself. The twins were at the kitchen table, eating the soft scrambled eggs and sliced mango that Amora prepared for them every morning without variation, because Ko had decided at age 2 that breakfast must always be exactly this, and any deviation produced a level of protest disproportionate to his small body. Serena appeared in the kitchen doorway in a silk robe, her hair wrapped, her face bare. Without the careful construction of her public appearance, she looked younger and more fragile and somehow more dangerous. She looked at her sons. Kofi looked up from his plate. He had egg on his chin. He regarded his mother with the frank, uncomplicated stare of a child who has not yet learned to perform emotion he does not feel. Kojo did not look up at all. He was focused on separating his mango pieces into a precise arrangement that followed a logic only he understood. "Good morning," Serena said. "Morning," Ko said, and returned to his eggs. Joe said nothing. Serena's jaw tightened, barely, just a fraction, the kind of movement that only someone watching carefully would catch. Amora, who was standing at the counter slicing fruit and watching everything with her peripheral vision, caught it. "Can I get you something?" Amora asked. "There is fresh tea. Or I can make coffee." Serena turned to look at her. The gaze lasted a half-second longer than was comfortable. "Tea," she said. "No sugar." "Yes, Serena sat down at the far end of the table, not near the boys, not at the head where Kwame sat, but at the side, the position of someone who is present without quite committing to presence. She placed her phone face down on the table. She folded her hands. She watched her sons eat. Amora moved quietly. She always moved quietly. She set the tea beside Serena's hands and stepped back. "What do they do?" Serena asked suddenly. Amora paused. "In the mornings. After breakfast. What do they do?" "They play in the garden, usually. Then we do letters. Ko has been learning his letters, he is very fast. Joe prefers numbers. Then lunch, then rest time, then." "We," Serena said. Amora stopped. "You said we." Serena's voice was perfectly level. "We do letters." The kitchen was very quiet. Even Joe had stopped arranging his mango. "I meant the boys and I," Amora said carefully. "I teach them in the mornings. Until they are old enough for school." "You teach them?" "Yes, Mr. Osei asked me to." "I know what my husband asked you to do." Serena picked up her tea. She looked out the window toward the garden. "I am simply observing how far that asking has extended." There was nothing to say to that. Amora said nothing. She turned back to the counter and continued slicing fruit, and her hands were completely steady, and inside her chest her heart was doing something she refused to acknowledge. Kwame came home that evening at 7, which was early for him. She suspected the timing was deliberate, a show of effort for his wife's return. He brought flowers, which was unusual enough that even the security guard at the gate had apparently commented on it, because Amora heard this from the gardener, who heard it from the guard himself. She served dinner and kept herself invisible, which was an art she had refined over years. There was a version of invisibility available to household staff in wealthy homes, a kind of social camouflage, achieved through stillness and silence and the careful suppression of any quality that might make you memorable. Amora was very good at it. She could move through a room full of people and leave no trace. But she listened. She always listened. Not from dishonesty, she was not a dishonest woman, but because information in the Osei household flowed exclusively through the room she was not supposed to be in, and information, she had long ago decided, was the only currency she could afford to collect. Kwame and Serena's conversation over dinner was careful and surface level. The kind of talk between two people who have agreed, without speaking, to leave the real conversation for later. He asked about her flight. She asked about the business. They spoke about a cousin's wedding coming up in Lagos. They did not mention the twins, who had eaten earlier and were already in the nursery under Amora's watch. After dinner, after the table was cleared and the kitchen restored to order, Amora gave the boys their bath and their bedtime routine. The songs, the stories, the specific arrangement of blankets that each of them required, and then she sat in the corridor outside the nursery with a glass of water and let the tiredness move through her body like a tide. She heard footsteps on the stairs. Serena appeared at the end of the corridor. She had changed into proper clothes now, a simple but expensive dress, her hair released from its wrap and falling around her shoulders. She looked at Amora sitting on the small chair outside the nursery door. Something crossed her face. Something Amora could not read. Are they asleep? Serena asked. K.O. is. Joe takes a little longer. Serena nodded slowly. She moved toward the nursery door. Her hand rested on the handle. She stood there without opening it for what felt like a very long time. Then, he really said Mama? To you? Amora's blood went cold. She did not show it. She had long ago learned to keep her body perfectly still when her insides were moving. Children say many things at that age. They are still learning what words mean. That is not what I asked. A pause. Yes, Amora said. He said it once, about a year ago. He has not said it in that way since. Serena's hand slid from the door handle. She turned and looked at Amora directly. The first time since her return that she had looked at her without that veil of careful social neutrality. What was underneath it was not hatred. It was something worse. It was pain. I was sick, Serena said. I want you to understand that. I did not simply leave. I was unwell in a way that I cannot fully. She stopped. Started again. I am not a bad mother. No one has said that, You did not have to say it. Her voice dropped to something almost inaudible. The way my sons looked at you this morning said it for you. Amora rose from her chair. She kept her posture respectful, her voice soft, her face arranged into the expression that 7 years in this household had perfected. The expression that was warm without being familiar, that was kind without being equal. Your sons love you, she said. They are small and they are shy with people they do not see often. That is all. It is nothing that cannot be repaired. Serena looked at her for a long moment. Do you know how easy it would be, she said quietly, to resent you? Amora met her eyes. Yes, I imagine it would be very easy. Something passed between them, not warmth, not quite, but something honest. Something that acknowledged the impossibility of this situation without either of them flinching from it. Then Serena looked away. I am going to be here now, she said. Properly here. I need you to understand what that means. I understand completely. I will take over the boys' mornings. Their routines. The meals. The lessons. She paused. Your role will return to what it was originally. Of course. I am not dismissing you. My husband. She stopped. Something flickered. You have been valuable to this household. That is not in question. Thank you, Serena nodded once, the nod of a woman concluding a business arrangement, and turned toward the nursery door again. She opened it this time and slipped inside, and Amora stood in the corridor and listened to the soft sound of Serena's voice drifting through the door, low, tentative, trying. Amora went downstairs. She sat in the kitchen in the dark for a long time. She told herself she was relieved. She told herself this was right, and good, and exactly as it should be. She told herself that she was the housekeeper, and they were not her children, and she had always known this moment would come. She told herself all of these things. She almost believed them. 3 weeks passed. Serena tried. Amora watched her try, and there was no other word for it, painful. Not because Serena was a bad mother, but because love between people who do not know each other takes time, and the twins had no understanding of why they should need to learn to love this woman who had appeared from nowhere to replace the warm, constant presence they had always known. K.O. accepted Serena faster than his brother. He was the more adaptable of the two, always had been. The child who would eat something new without drama and explore a strange room without fear. By the end of the first week, he was allowing Serena to read him his bedtime story, and by the second week, he had taken her hand in the garden without being prompted. Joe was different. Joe, who had always been the quieter twin, the watchful one, the child who processed everything before responding to anything, Joe would not be moved. He was polite to Serena the way a small diplomat is polite to a foreign official. He answered her questions. He sat beside her at meals. He accepted her presence the way you accept weather, without complaint, without welcome. But he watched Amora. Wherever Amora moved in the house, Joe's eyes tracked her. If she left the room, he would grow quiet and distracted. If she was absent for too long, gone to market, or to her quarters, or occupied with some task in another part of the house, he would find reasons to go searching for her. Serena noticed. Amora could see her noticing, could see the careful, controlled way that Serena registered each small slight, for that was how she experienced them, as slights, as evidence of some failure that was simultaneously not her fault and completely devastating. Amora began to make herself scarce. Deliberately, strategically, she arranged her tasks to keep her in the back of the house during the mornings when Serena was with the boys. She stopped appearing in the garden in the afternoons. She took her meals alone in the kitchen, early, before the family sat down. She was trying to give the boys room to turn toward their mother. She was trying to make herself smaller, less present, less necessary. It was the right thing to do. It was also the hardest thing she had ever done. The document arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier in a grey envelope stamped with the name of a London medical institution. Amora signed for it, as she signed for all deliveries, and placed it on Kwame's desk in his home study, as she placed all correspondence. It was routine. She did not think about it. But Kwame came home that evening and went directly to his study without stopping, without his usual ritual of loosening his tie in the hallway and leaving his briefcase by the staircase foot. He went straight to the study and closed the door. He was in there for a long time. When he came out, his face was the face of a man who has received news that has reorganized the interior of his world. He walked past Amora in the hallway without seeing her, not rudely, but genuinely without seeing her, the way people walk through rooms when their minds are somewhere else entirely. She watched him go upstairs. She looked at the study door. She looked away. She went to the kitchen and began preparing dinner, and she kept her hands busy and her thoughts to herself, and she did not allow herself to wonder about the grey envelope or the London Medical Institution or the expression on Kwame Ose's face. She was very good at not wondering. But that night, lying in her small room at the back of the house, she stared at the ceiling and felt it again. That atmospheric shift, that pressure change, that animal instinct older than language. Something was coming. She could feel it the way you feel rain before the first drop falls. In your skin, in your bones, in some place beneath all your careful composure where the truth lives before the rest of you is ready to receive it. Something was coming. And this time, she understood with cold, settled certainty, it was something that no amount of quiet or discipline or careful invisibility would allow her to escape. Kwame Ose was not a man who lost sleep. In 39 years of life, through the death of his father, through the collapse of a business partnership that nearly took the company with it, through the slow and bewildering dissolution of his marriage, through all of it, he had slept. Not easily, not always deeply, but he had slept. His body understood rest as a discipline, the same way it understood exercise and diet and the management of emotion. You maintained yourself. You did not surrender to the chaos inside you. You slept. He did not sleep that Tuesday night. He sat in his study until 2 a.m. with the grey envelope open on the desk before him and the document inside spread flat under the lamp. He read it 3 times. Then he sat and looked at it without reading it, just looked at the words, the clinical formatting, the institutional letterhead, as if by staring long enough he could change what it said. He could not. The document was a genetic report. Comprehensive, detailed, produced by one of the most respected private medical laboratories in London. It had been commissioned, the cover letter explained, as part of a broader health assessment, a standard procedure that Serena's doctors had recommended during her extended treatment. Standard procedure. The results were not standard at all. Kwame had known, on some level, for a long time. Not known, that was too strong. Suspected was too weak. It was something in between, something he had kept in a sealed room in the back of his mind, a room he walked past every day without opening. The boys had been born 7 weeks premature. Premature deliveries were not uncommon. The timing of Serena's pregnancy had been. He had done the mathematics, quietly, alone, late at night after she had first told him. The timing had been not quite right. But he had loved her. He had chosen to love her, which with Kwame amounted to the same thing. And the boys were here, and they were real, and they were his sons in every way that a father builds a son, every morning routine, every school form, every decision made in their interest, even if he had made those decisions largely from a distance, largely through the intermediary of a quiet woman in a grey uniform who understood his children better than he did. The report confirmed what the sealed room had always contained. Kofi and Kojo Osei were not his biological sons. He called no one. He made no decisions that night. He simply sat with it. The knowledge, the weight of it, the way it reorganized everything he thought he understood about the last 7 years of his life. He thought about Serena in London. He thought about the phone calls that had grown infrequent and then almost ceased. He thought about the way she had looked at the boys when she returned, not quite the way a mother looks at her children, but the way a person looks at evidence of something they would prefer not to be reminded of. He thought about guilt. He thought about what guilt looks like when it is maintained over years, when it becomes load-bearing, when a person has built their entire recovery, their therapy, their treatments, their new careful self, on top of it. He thought about the boys asleep upstairs. He thought about Amora. That last thought arrived without invitation and without explanation, and he did not examine it closely. He simply noted it, the way you note an unexpected sound in a house you thought you knew, and he set it aside. He turned off the lamp. He went upstairs. He did not go to the master bedroom. He stood for a moment in the corridor outside the nursery and listened to the silence inside, the deep, certain silence of children who trust completely that the world will be safe until morning. Then he went to the guest room, and he lay down on top of the covers in his clothes, and he stared at the ceiling, and eventually, near dawn, he slept. Amora noticed the change in him the next morning. She noticed everything in this house, she always had, but the change in Kwame was not subtle. He came down for breakfast 30 minutes later than usual, wearing yesterday's shirt, and he sat at the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room, which he had not done in years. He accepted the coffee she placed before him without looking up. The boys were already dressed and in the garden with Serena, who had instituted a morning walk as part of her campaign to build routine with them. Through the kitchen window, Amora could see Serena crouching in the grass while Ko showed her something he had found. An insect, probably, he was fascinated by insects, and Joe stood a careful 2 feet away, watching. "How long have you worked here?" Amora turned. Kwame was looking at her now, directly at her, with an attention that was different from his usual manner. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but focused in a way that made her aware of herself. 7 years in April, sir. He nodded slowly. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "Before you came here, what did you do?" She paused. "I held various positions, sir. Domestic work, mostly." "Your qualifications. You have more than this work requires." It was not quite a question. She answered it carefully anyway. "I studied for 2 years at university. I did not finish." "Why not?" "Family circumstances, sir." He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked back into his coffee. "You have been good to my sons," he said. The sentence was simple and plain and delivered without any of the formal distance he usually maintained, and perhaps because of that plainness it landed with unexpected force. "I have not said that enough. I am saying it now." Amora kept her expression composed. "Thank you, sir. I mean it." "I know you do, sir." He was quiet again. Outside, Ko shrieked with delight over his insect. Even Joe laughed. She could hear it, Joe's rare, sudden laugh, like a window opening in a closed room. Kwame heard it too. He turned to look out the window, and something moved across his face. Love, unmistakably, the real kind, the kind that costs something. "They are good boys," he said, almost to himself. "They are extraordinary boys," Amora said, and she meant it with every part of herself. He looked at her again. That focused, different attention. "Yes," he said. "They are." He finished his coffee and left for the office, and Amora stood at the window and watched him go, and she thought about the grey envelope, and she thought about his face last night in the hallway, and she thought about the sealed room in her own mind, the one she had been walking past for 7 years without opening. She thought about these things. Then she went and called the boys in for breakfast. Serena found the document on Thursday. This was not, Amora would later understand, an accident. Serena was a woman of precision. She had been waiting, for what, Amora did not yet know, and she had been watching, and on Thursday morning, when Kwame left early and the boys were occupied and the house settled into its mid-morning quiet, Serena went into the study. Amora was on the upper landing changing linens when she heard the study door open and close. She heard nothing for a long time. Then she heard it close again. She did not see Serena for the rest of the morning. At lunch, Serena appeared in the dining room composed and dressed and perfectly assembled. She ate with the boys. She asked Ko about his insect. He launched into an explanation of such technical enthusiasm that she smiled despite herself. And she asked Joe what numbers he had been practicing, And Joe told her, briefly, watching her face the way he watched everyone's face, cataloging. After lunch, after the boys went down for their rest, Serena appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I need to speak with you," she said to Amora. "Come to the sitting room, please." The sitting room was a formal space, used for guests, for significant conversations, for the occasions when the Osei household needed to present itself as the kind of household that had sitting rooms. Amora had cleaned it hundreds of times. She had never sat in it. She sat now, at Serena's gesture, on the edge of one of the cream armchairs. Serena sat across from her. She had the document in her hand, folded once. She set it on the cushion beside her and left it there. "I am going to ask you something," Serena said. "And I need you to tell me the truth. I need you to set aside whatever loyalty you have built toward my husband in 7 years and tell me the truth." Amora held herself very still. "I will try, Did you know?" Serena asked. "About the report. About what it contains. Did Kwame tell you?" "No," Amora said. "I did not know." Serena studied her face. "But you suspected something. When he came home Tuesday night. I noticed he was troubled. I did not know why." Another pause. Serena looked down at the document beside her, then back up. "The boys are not his," she said. Flat, declarative, the voice of someone who has rehearsed saying a thing until the saying of it no longer breaks them. "Biologically. The report confirms it." Amora said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I was involved with someone else," Serena continued. "Before the pregnancy. During. It does not matter what it was. It is over and it has been over, and I have spent 3 years in London trying to become a person who can live with what I did." Her voice was controlled, but her hands were not. They were pressed flat against her thighs, the way you press a wound. "Kwame does not know that I know he has seen this report. He has said nothing to me. Which means he is deciding what to do." She looked at Amora directly. "Which means everything in this house is about to change." "Yes," Amora said quietly. "I imagine it is. I am telling you this because..." Serena stopped. Started again. "I am telling you this because you are the person in this house who actually knows those boys. Whatever happens between Kwame and me, whatever decisions get made, someone needs to be thinking about Kofi and Kojo. And that person," her voice tightened, just slightly, around the admission. "That person is you." The room was very quiet. Amora thought about Ko's insect collection, kept in 3 showboxes under his bed, each specimen labeled in her handwriting. She thought about Joe's number sequences, the way he could add before he could read, the way he fell asleep counting. She thought about 7 years of 2 a.m. risings and fever nights and first steps and first words and the 10,000 small moments that constitute the actual substance of a childhood. She thought about the sealed room in her own mind. She said carefully. "There is something I need to tell you." Serena went still. "I have told no one," Amora said. "Not Mr. Osei. Not anyone who has worked in this house. I have kept it because..." She stopped. Measured her words. "Because my situation was difficult when I came here, and the work was stable, and I told myself it was not relevant. I told myself it changed nothing." "What are you saying?" Serena's voice had dropped to almost nothing. Amora looked at her hands. Then she looked up. "When I was at university," she said. "Before I left. I was studying medical science. 2nd year. I was involved with a lecturer. It was brief. It ended badly and I left the university and I never..." She breathed. "I had a child. Before I came here. A baby girl. I was very young and I was alone and I made a decision that I have carried every day since." Serena was motionless. "I gave her up," Amora said. "Through a private arrangement. Not an agency, a private arrangement, because I had nothing, and the father wanted nothing to do with either of us, and I believed I was making the best choice available to me." She paused. "She would be 9 years old now. I do not know where she is. I do not know her name, the name they gave her. I only know that she exists, somewhere, and that every child I have cared for in this house has been," her voice, so controlled for so long, moved slightly off its foundation, "has been her, in some way. In the only way I could manage." The silence in the sitting room was enormous. Serena was looking at her with an expression that had moved entirely beyond the social register, beyond employer and employee, beyond the careful geometry of their respective positions. She was looking at Amora the way one person looks at another when the performance has stopped and only the human remains. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. Amora was quiet for a moment. "Because you said everything is about to change," she said. "And you are right. And I think, before it does, the truth should be on the table. All of it. She met Serena's eyes. Whatever truth there is. Serena looked down at the folded document beside her. Two women sat in a formal room in a wealthy house, surrounded by the inheritance of secrets that neither of them had chosen and both of them had agreed to carry. Outside, through the high windows, the garden was bright and ordinary. Somewhere upstairs, two small boys were sleeping. All of it, Serena repeated softly, almost to herself. She picked up the document. She turned it over in her hands. There is something else, she said. Her voice had changed, gone quieter, and underneath the quiet, something that sounded like the first tremor before a larger movement. Something in this report. Beyond the paternity. She looked up at Amora. Something that I think you need to see. She held the document out. Amora reached across the space between them and took it. She unfolded it. She read. And the sealed room in the back of her mind, the one she had been walking past for 7 years without opening, broke open without warning, and everything inside it came flooding into the light.